Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the Runaway Bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Tara Baker. Tara Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother later remarried. She is the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, she showed a strong interest in the legal system, with the desire to pursue a career as a lawyer or judge. She would often engage in mock trials with her stuffed animals, create contracts with her relatives, and even write letters to politicians, including the President of the United States, to express her opinions. After high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating in 1999. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia, one of the top law schools in the country, located in Athens, a small town close to her parents' home. To avoid dorm life, Tara rented a house with 2 other university students, one of whom she knew from college. Tara worked at a prestigious law firm in downtown Athens, covering her expenses and gaining valuable experience in her future profession. In January 2001, Tara spent a lot of time studying at the university library. On the evening of January 18th, she went to the library to study with a friend. Her friend left the library around 7:30 p.m. Tara stayed behind, calling her friend at 9:46 p.m. to check if she had arrived home safely, mentioning that she would head home soon. The next day, around 6 p.m., Tara's mother, Virginia Baker, received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as a detective. The detective tells Virginia that they need her daughter Tara's fingerprints for their current investigation. Believing it was a prank, Virginia hung up, but her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to call the Athens police station to verify the call. Police said the caller was actually a forensic detective, and they further informed her that there had been a fire at Tara's home. The detective explained that they were trying to locate Tara, but so far, they had only found one of Tara's roommates, who had been out at the time of the fire. The other roommate was also missing, and investigators suspected that the unidentified body they found might be one of them. Virginia was desperate for information and asked the detective to describe the room where the body was found. The detective's response sent a chill down Tara's spine. The room was filled with Tara antique items, which she had spent years collecting. Virginia and her family immediately drove to Athens to see what was happening to their daughter, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arriving at the police station, they were forced to wait for several hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective emerged and delivered the devastating news. The body found in the house was indeed Tara's, and her death was a result of murder, not the fire. However, the detective was exhausted and declined to answer any questions. Before departing, he shared one crucial detail: Tara had inadvertently left behind a clue. Fragments of the perpetrator's skin were found under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's family was shocked, confused, and hopeless by the news. Despite their requests for more information about Tara, the police remained silent, not providing any further details. The family of Tara Baker was left in the dark about her murder investigation. Despite their repeated attempts to get information from detectives, they were met with silence. The local police department never reached out to them, forcing the family to constantly call and visit the station to beg for updates. Through persistence, they were able to gather some details about the case. Firefighters were called to Tara's address on January 19th at approximately 11 a.m. in response to a fire. After extinguishing the flames, they found Tara's body inside. The medical examiner's report confirmed that she had been murdered, with signs of strangulation and stab wounds. It appeared that the killer had set the fire to destroy evidence after Tara's death. However, the police refused to share the medical examiner's report with Tara's parents, leaving them without crucial information about her murder. The family also discovered that some evidence may have been destroyed by the firefighters. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon in cases like this. Investigators may not have properly secured the crime scene, which could have resulted in the loss of evidence. As Tara's family sought answers about her death, they were met with a lack of transparency and disrespect from the police. They were not kept informed about the investigation, were often treated rudely and unprofessionally. In an attempt to hold the police accountable, they began to record their conversations and filed complaints, but these efforts yielded no results. The family sought the advice of a renowned criminologist. However, the local police department would only allow him to review the case materials under one condition: he was not to share any information or findings with Tara's relatives. This left Tara's family unable to find answers about her death. Tara's family waited 10 years to get her death certificate. After writing to the state governor, they finally received it, but it didn't give them the answers they were looking for. Instead of explaining what caused her death, the certificate simply stated that she died from multiple injuries, without providing any further details. Despite the police continued their investigation, but their actions raised several questions. When Tara's body was discovered, firefighters immediately called the police, recognizing that a murder had taken place. But the crime scene was seriously destroyed due to extensive damage from the fire and water used to extinguish it. Furthermore, the family later discovered that some surviving items at the crime scene were not examined for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was found missing from her room, but other valuables were intact. Since there was no evidence of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara was familiar with her killer and had voluntarily allowed them into her room. Although the crime scene was heavily damaged due to the fire, investigators established that Tara's two roommates were away from town at the time, leaving Tara home alone. Because it was difficult to determine the exact time of death, medical experts narrowed the window down to a time frame of 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, to 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. The likelihood of the crime occurring during the early morning hours, given the speed at which the fire spread. The police investigation uncovered two significant leads. One involved a witness who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder, wearing only a t-shirt and jeans despite the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered a suspicious phone call made to Tara's university a few days before her death. A heavily intoxicated man had called the university's student information line. The man managed to correctly provide Tara Baker's name and request her phone number. Although the phone call was highly suspicious, the police were unable to identify the caller. Meanwhile, Tara's boyfriend became an immediate person of interest in the investigation. He provided an alibi, which was verified by the police, but they continued to view him with suspicion. Police have repeatedly questioned him and asked him to provide additional biological samples, answer additional questions, or undergo a lie detector test. Tara's boyfriend was asked to identify her body after the fire. He had traveled from another city to Athens as soon as he heard the news. Although Tara's parents were already in town, the police requested that the boyfriend make the identification. However, he was not allowed to enter the house. Instead, a police officer took a photograph of the body and showed it to him on a camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and unsure if the body was Tara's. To confirm, he asked to see a pair of earrings he had given her. The officer retrieved the earrings from the body Tara's and showed them to him. After seeing the earrings, the boyfriend confirmed that the body was indeed Tara's. The police then shifted their focus to a male student who had a reputation for being troublesome. Several female students reported that he had repeatedly asked them out on dates, despite being told no, and made them feel uncomfortable with his behavior. The student had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Detectives investigated the student but found no evidence linking him to the crime. They even asked Tara's friends to monitor the boy's activities, but this did not bring any new progress. Detectives began to focus on another suspect, a guy who was Tara's co-worker. When they interviewed his co-workers, they discovered that his behavior in the days leading up to the murders was very strange. Specifically, he had stopped socializing with a group of close co-workers. Additionally, just days before the murders, he had told Tara that he would not be able to attend her birthday party, which was scheduled for the day after the murders. On the morning of January 19th, one of Tara's co-workers tried to convince him to attend birthday celebration, as Tara had been hurt by his initial refusal. When the colleague visited the attorney's office, however, he was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as the attorney was typically present at the office in the mornings. A check of his work schedule revealed no meetings or appointments, adding to the mystery of his absence. His behavior raised suspicions after Tara's murder. He was absent on the day of the murder, but the next day, he visited a colleague's home and acted strangely. Many suspect that he regularly used illegal drugs, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. The co-worker noticed several fresh scratches on his neck, which were notable because several pieces of skin were found under Tara's fingernails, suggesting that she may have scratched her attacker in self-defense. When questioned about the scratches, he claimed he got them from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. However, when asked about his suspicions regarding the killer, his response was unusual. He screams that Tara's father is the culprit, but he cannot produce any evidence to back up his accusation. Furthermore, he resigned from his position just a few months after the murder and left the state. It is unclear whether the police compared his DNA with the samples found under Tara's nails. But they have not shared any information about this aspect of the investigation, even with Tara's relatives. The police discovered that he was married, but still secretly dated two female colleagues. This revelation could explain his unusual behavior and unexplained absences from work. Both women also suspected that he was using illicit substances. However, police found no evidence to prove his involvement in the murder and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The detectives also investigated the maintenance company employees who had access to the house where Tara lived. They had a spare key, which might explain why there was no sign of forced entry. Unfortunately, this lead also yielded no results. Since then, the case has had no new clues. The police continue to search for new suspects and witnesses, but they are keeping many details about their investigation under wraps to avoid it being undermined. The investigation into Tara's murder continued over the years, with several new leads emerging, but it did not yield any results for the investigation. One witness reported seeing an African-American man near Tara's house on the day of the fire, while another claimed to have seen blood on a classmate's notebook shortly after the murder. Despite police efforts to pursue these leads, they ultimately led to dead ends. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward in hopes of generating new leads. The detective team working on the case changed several times, but they all encountered considerable difficulties due to lack of evidence. The fire in Tara's room burned most of the evidence, leaving the police with few clues to investigate. 19 years after Tara's murder, a podcast about her case was released, generating renewed interest and attention. The podcast gathered information from Tara's family and individuals connected to the case, re-examining the evidence and helped reinvestigate the case. The police department took notice of the podcast, leading to better cooperation between detectives and Tara's family. For several months, detectives reviewed all available information and evidence, using modern DNA analysis tools to re-examine the evidence. Their efforts paid off on May 13, 2024, when police announced that they had finally arrested the perpetrator, 23 years after the murder. The suspect, Edric Lamont Faust, 48, was arrested, but police did not reveal how they identified the suspect, citing the need to keep some information secret to protect ongoing legal proceedings. Investigators only mentioned that modern DNA analysis tools and other biological evidence played a crucial role in Edric's identification. Further details of the case were not disclosed at the press conference, and police chose to withhold evidence to avoid compromising Edric's trial. However, his arrest documents revealed that he was accused of assaulting Tara. Additionally, a piece of skin was found under Tara's fingernails, which was used to extract the killer's DNA using modern DNA analysis tools. The police had likely known about Edric for years due to his long history of crime, which included multiple arrests. At the time of Tara's murder, he was 25 and lived in the same city as she. Despite this, the police initially found no evidence suggesting that Edric knew Tara. It wasn't until recently, thanks to advanced DNA analysis, that Edric became a suspect in the case. Detectives only started investigating him a few days before his arrest. Edric is currently in jail awaiting trial. The police are confident that they have found the right person, as they obtained irrefutable DNA evidence. As a result, Edric was denied bail, and Tara's case is now considered closed. Tara's family finally finds out the truth after 23 years. Thanks to a new team of detectives who reopen the case and solve it. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Mitzi Sanchez. Mitzi Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a large, with 2 brothers and a sister. As a child, Mitzi was cheerful and bright, enjoying time outdoors with friends and playing with her siblings. From a young age, she demonstrated independence, often walking to elementary school with her brother without adult supervision, as the school was nearby. On August 10, 2000, Mitzi's 8th birthday, she was excited about the celebration party her family had planned. However, when she asked her mom if she could skip school, the request was denied. Upset, Mitzi left her home with her brother at around 7:30 a.m. The plan was for her to wait for her brother after classes, and they would walk home together. But when her brother went outside the school, he couldn't find Mitzi. Assuming she had already left without him, he headed home alone. However, when he arrived home, Mitzi had disappeared without a trace. Mitzi's older sister grew concerned when she realized Mitzi was missing, especially since her birthday party was supposed to take place that day. As her absence seemed unusual, the sister called their mother around 4 p.m. to report the situation. The mother immediately contacted Mitzi's school and confirmed that Mitzi had attended all her classes that day. However, when the mother reached out to family members and Mitzi's friends, no one had seen her after school. Mitzi's family became worried and started looking for her. Family, friends, and neighbors mounted a massive search operation. Some walked the streets, while others went door to door along the route from her home to school, asking locals if they had seen her. They also distributed flyers with information about Mitzi. Despite their extensive efforts, they were unable to find her, leading Mitzi's parents to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly joined the search and local media started covering the case. The news of Mitzi's disappearance spread quickly, not just in local news outlets but also across the state. Mitzi's family has given several interviews to raise awareness of her disappearance. Her mother desperately pleaded with them to return her daughter safely. The police received a lot of information, but none of it was useful. 24 hours after Mitzi went missing, the investigation had new clues. A man contacted the police to report finding bloody rags at a landfill. After further examination, experts discovered that the rags were actually bed sheets from a hotel in Vallejo. The evidence was sent to the lab for analysis, but it would take several days to obtain the results. Investigators also went to the hotel, but they were unable to confirm whether Mitzi was there. As the investigators waited for the lab results, they thoroughly searched the landfill for any additional clues, but they found nothing. However, the next day, August 12th, the police received a call that changed the course of the investigation. At around 11 a.m., a man called the police to report a disturbing incident. While driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara, he saw a little girl running towards his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. The girl quickly got into the van, and the driver saw a man running in their direction. A young girl escaped from her kidnapper and sought help from a van driver. As soon as she got into the truck, the kidnapper quickly fled the scene. The girl, who identified herself as Mitzi Sanchez, told the driver what had happened, and he immediately contacted the police. The officers quickly took Mitzi to a hospital for a medical examination. They also arranged for her to speak with her mother over the phone, and soon her relatives arrived at the hospital, where they were reunited with Mitzi. The van driver proved to be a valuable witness in the investigation. He was able to provide the police with the license plate number of the kidnapper's vehicle, which he had seen as it sped away. The truck driver happened to be on the road that day, which was lucky. If he hadn't been there, the kidnapper might have caught up with Mitzi. The police checked the license plate and discovered that the car belonged to 39-year-old Curtis Dean Anderson, a man with a history of crime. He had previous convictions for theft and kidnapping, and was also suspected of other offenses. Police took a statement from Mitzi about what happened to her. Mitzi recounted that on August 10th, she was excited to finish school and head home to celebrate her birthday with her family. When her last class ended, she decided not to wait for her brother and walked home alone. As she walked, she noticed a car parked by the side of the road about a few hundred yards away. Inside, a man was watching her through the rearview mirror. The girl felt uncomfortable, but she was not worried because it was daytime and she was walking on a familiar street. In addition, because she was young, she was not aware of the potential risks posed by strangers. Mitzi was approached by a man who got out of his car and asked for her help. He claimed to have a leg injury from an accident and needed assistance in retrieving a roll of tape from under the car seat. Despite feeling uneasy, Mitzi agreed to help, as her parents had taught her to assist others in need. However, as soon as Mitzi reached for the tape, the man's intentions became clear. He pushed her into the car, covered her mouth, and slammed the door shut. Mitzi tried to scream, but it was too late. The man drove away, Mitzi to watch in horror as they passed by her home, where her family was preparing to celebrate her birthday. The man eventually stopped in a deserted parking lot, where he gave Mitzi new clothes and forced her to change. He then threw away her old clothes in a nearby trash bin. He warned Mitzi not to try to escape, claiming he had a gun and that no one had ever managed to escape from him. For the next few hours, Mitzi was driven to an unknown location. Mitzi demanded to know why she had been kidnapped. But the man's response was that he had gone through a similar experience as a child. When night fell, he stopped the car again and began covering the windows with rags to conceal their location. He then shackled Mitzi's leg with a chain and padlock. The man pulled out a bottle of alcohol and insisted that Mitzi drink some. Despite her initial reluctance, she eventually gave in. He took pictures of her using a camera. The perpetrator then lay down in the car to sleep. Fearing that she would be at his mercy if she fell asleep, Mitzi stayed awake and began thinking of an escape plan. Her chance came when she saw a police car driving past the parking lot. However, it was too far away, and she realized that even if she screamed, the officers would not be able to hear her. The next day, the perpetrator continued to drive Mitzi around the city, forcing her to sit on the floor of the car and covering her with sheets to conceal her from view. At one point, he briefly stepped out of the vehicle, giving Mitzi an opportunity to try and escape. She attempted to free her leg from the chain but quickly realized it was impossible. She also found a nail file and tried to use it to unlock the padlock, but unfortunately, it didn't work. When the perpetrator returned to the car and drove away, he made a disturbing claim: he had stopped by Mitzi's parents' house. Under the guise of a good citizen, he asked for flyers to distribute around town, further manipulating the situation. Mitzi was left feeling shocked and overwhelmed, knowing she had been so close to home yet still remained in captivity. Over the next few hours, the perpetrator repeatedly stopped the car, getting in and out. Eventually, he drove to a remote area outside of town and parked. There, he committed a sexual assault against Mitzi, leaving her in a state of shock. Afterward, the perpetrator fell asleep. The next morning, he resumed driving, making several stops to buy cigarettes and alcohol. When he returned to the car and leaned into the cabin, an object fell out of his pocket. He warned Mitzi not to look, but she disobeyed. She glanced down and saw a large set of keys. Mitzi quickly realized that one of the keys could open the lock on her chain. Although afraid of the perpetrator's possible reaction, Mitzi was brave enough to act. She grabbed the keys, selected one that seemed to fit the lock best, and tried to unlock it. To her relief, the key worked. Mitzi managed to free herself from the chain and moved towards the car door, which was the last barrier between her and freedom. To escape, she opened the window and tried to climb out. However, her body was exhausted, and her legs had almost no strength left. Using the last of my strength, she pushed herself upwards and finally jumped out of the car. As she moved around it, she spotted her kidnapper, who instantly saw her as well. He yelled for her to come back, but Mitzi had no intention of surrendering. She took off in the opposite direction, and her kidnapper started chasing after her. As she fled, she attempted to get help from passing cars by waving her hands and screaming, but all the cars ignored her pleas and kept driving by. Not losing hope, Mitzi kept running forward. In her desperate situation, every moment seemed like an eternity. Mitzi is driven by the fear that if she stops even for a moment, she will be captured by the perpetrator, a fate she is determined to avoid. Finally, she spotted a van and she ran towards it, jumping in front of it to stop the driver. The driver quickly halted, and Mitzi climbed into the cabin, exhausted, dehydrated, and starving, but safe. At the hospital, she received the medical attention she needed, and her family soon arrived to be reunited with her. Mitzi's story quickly became top news in town. When she returned home, thousands of people gathered on her street, cheering and shouting birthday wishes she had missed while in captivity. Meanwhile, the police were searching for her kidnapper, whose location remained unknown. During the investigation, the police showed Mitzi's mother a photo of the suspect, and she recognized him. She had seen him twice before, once before Mitzi's abduction, when he was standing on their street, staring at their house, and again the day after Mitzi's disappearance, when he came to their home asking for flyers. Police eventually arrested the suspect, Curtis. He confessed to Mitzi that she was not his first victim and that no one had ever managed to escape him before. Curtis's careful planning and execution suggested he had experience with similar crimes. It is notable that Curtis had a prior conviction for kidnapping a woman in 1991, for which he served time until his release in November 1999. The trial began in April of the same year. Mitzi bravely testified in a crowded courtroom, recounting every detail of Curtis's crimes against her. Even though Curtis was there, Mitzi remained calm and completed his mission. As a result, Curtis received a 251-year prison sentence. However, this marked the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. Detectives regularly visited Curtis in jail, questioning him about potential involvement in other crimes. One of these visits, they discovered that Curtis had confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and murdering 8 additional girls. The inmate agreed to cooperate with the police, sharing Curtis's confession in detail. However, Curtis himself was reluctant to reveal all his secrets. Instead of denying the allegations, he attempted to negotiate privileges in exchange for information, speaking with detectives in riddles. As for Mitzi, she was constantly bullied and ridiculed by her classmates, labeling her the kidnapped girl. They even told her she should have died instead of being rescued. The constant bullying made her school years extremely difficult, which hindered her recovery from the traumatic experience. Mitzi could no longer handle the immense pressure. As a result, she turned to alcohol as a means of coping with stress, relying more and more on it. Eventually, she lost hope of returning to a normal life. However, a car accident after a party with friends changes her life forever. Mitzi suffered serious injuries, including a broken neck and arm, and spent 2 weeks in a coma. Upon waking up, she received news from her doctors. She was pregnant with a daughter. This gave Mitzi the power to change her life for the better. She decided to devote herself entirely to her daughter and also to helping other children who were victims of various crimes. Mitzi went on to found a non-profit organization that continues to help those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he passed away in 2007 due to illness, just 6 years after being sentenced. The detectives' only regret was that they were unable to obtain full confessions from him regarding other cases he was suspected of being involved in. Notably, his son followed a similar path and was also convicted of murder. Unfortunately, the son's life was cut short in prison in 2019. The case of Lori Sars, the pregnant woman whose body was found in a city landfill, highlights how even a seemingly insignificant lie can lead to serious and tragic consequences. Behind every lie lies a motive, whether it's a desire to avoid punishment, gain advantage, or simply to maintain appearances. In some cases, lies are used to protect confidentiality or spare someone's feelings. In the case of Lori Sars, the story began with a small deception that snowballed into a devastating tragedy. Her mysterious disappearance in 2004 sent shockwaves through Salt Lake City. Her husband, Mark Hacking, reported her missing, sparking a massive search effort that captured national attention. However, the shocking truth behind Lori's disappearance would soon come to light. Mark Hacking's deceit stemmed from childhood trauma and a fear of not meeting others' expectations. As the details of his lies unraveled, the media frenzy intensified, with the case becoming the subject of numerous television talk shows and feature films. Lori Sars, also known by her married name Lori Hacking, was born in 1976. The tragic circumstances of her disappearance shed light on the destructive power of dishonesty and the devastating impact it can have on individuals and their loved ones. On December 31st, in the quaint city of Fullerton, nestled in California, a girl began her journey in the most unlikely of places, a children's orphanage, where she was placed immediately after birth. Her origins shrouded in mystery, with no trace of her birth parents. At the tender age of 2, fate smiled upon her as she was welcomed into the loving embrace of a religious couple, Thelma and Geraldo Suarez. Geraldo, hailing from the sun-kissed lands of São Paulo, Brazil, found himself teaching the intricacies of Portuguese and English at Sunny Hills High School. It was amidst the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro in the early 70s where he crossed paths with Thelma. Their shared mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cemented their bond, leading to a union in matrimony. Despite their devotion, biological children eluded them, but their hearts remained open to the blessings of adoption. Their journey brought them to Fullerton in the late 70s, where they embraced parenthood with open arms, welcoming Lori into their lives. In 1987, another addition, a son named Paul, completed their family. However, life's journey took an unexpected turn, leading the couple down separate paths, and the adopted children found solace under Thelma's care. Relocating to the tranquil town of Orem, Utah, mother and children forged ahead. Lori and Paul flourished, traversing the halls of local high schools and later venturing into the realms of higher education. Lori, in particular, blossomed into a compassionate, spirited young woman, her warmth and kindness touching the lives of all who crossed her path. Amidst the tapestry of her upbringing, Lori found love for the first time at the age of 19, a chapter in her life marked by the gentle whispers of romance and the promise of a future yet to unfold. Lori's path intertwined with that of her future husband, Mark Douglas Hacking. Born in April 1976 in the heart of North Carolina, Mark hailed from a lineage of esteemed medical professionals. As the youngest of 3 sons in the illustrious Hacking family, Mark inherited a legacy of excellence. His father, Douglas Hacking, stood as a prominent pediatrician, while his mother, Helena, contributed her expertise as a nurse. Mark's older brothers, Scotty and Lance, carved their own paths of success in the realm of science. Mark exuded an aura of determination and ambition, mirroring the aspirations of his esteemed kin. With dreams of pursuing a medical career akin to his family members, Mark radiated care and attentiveness, embodying the essence of a devoted family man. It was under the serendipitous veil of fate that Lori crossed paths with Mark, and from that moment, their bond remained unbroken. After 5 years of nurturing their romance, the couple took the leap into matrimony, forging a life together within the quaint confines of Salt Lake City, Utah. By then, Lori had already flourished in her career, ascending to the role of senior assistant manager in a prestigious company, while Mark, with honors adorning his academic journey, embarked on his medical odyssey at the University of Utah. Amidst their shared joy, the couple reveled in the anticipation of impending parenthood, with Lori's pregnancy casting a radiant glow upon their lives. Plans for a new chapter unfurled as they prepared to relocate to North Carolina, where Mark would pursue his medical residency, and Lori, her professional endeavors. Theirs was a tapestry of promise and potential, woven with dreams of a blissful future. Yet fate's cruel hand intervened on July 19, 2004, shattering their idyllic existence. Lori, 3 months pregnant, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of uncertainty and despair. Mark's frantic attempts to reach her on that fateful day were met with eerie silence, signaling the onset of a harrowing ordeal. As the days stretched into an agonizing abyss of unanswered questions, the mystery of Lori's disappearance veiled their once bright future in a shroud of darkness. Several hours elapsed before Mark made his way to the police station, his heart heavy with worry as he reported the inexplicable disappearance of his 27-year-old pregnant wife. According to Mark's account, Lori had ventured to a nearby park in the morning, a routine part of her pre-work exercise regimen, but failed to return home thereafter. Initially assuming she had proceeded directly to her workplace, Mark's concern deepened upon discovering Lori had left her phone behind. As he recounted the events to attentive police officers, Mark's voice trembled with apprehension. However, protocol dictated that a formal search for a missing adult would commence only after a 24-hour period had elapsed since the disappearance. Undeterred by bureaucratic timelines, Mark resolved to initiate his search, driven by the fear that Lori may have fallen ill and required assistance. Setting out to the park where Lori had intended to visit that day, Mark's hopes were dashed upon finding her car parked at the neighborhood's periphery, yet no sign of Lori in sight. Returning home, he embarked on a relentless quest, reaching out to friends, relatives, and colleagues in a desperate bid for information. Their collective response echoed his distress, with no one having seen or heard from Lori on that fateful day. Word of Lori's disappearance quickly spread, igniting a groundswell of community concern. Before law enforcement intervened, hundreds of individuals, comprising relatives, friends, acquaintances, and concerned citizens, rallied to join the search effort. Together, they combed the vicinity, engaging neighbors, local vendors, and passers-by in their quest for any semblance of information, while plastering the area with flyers adorned with Lori's visage, a poignant plea for her safe return. On July 20th, as the official report of Lori's disappearance emerged, the news swiftly reached the media, casting a pall of concern over Salt Lake City. In response, the relatives of the missing woman convened a press conference, their faces etched with worry, beseeching the community for assistance. Mark, Lori's husband, stood at the forefront, his anguish palpable as tears streamed down his cheeks, imploring anyone with information about his pregnant wife's whereabouts to come forward. By nightfall, a groundswell of support had materialized, with nearly 1,000 individuals joining the search effort. As police scrutinized Lori's abandoned car, a perplexing detail emerged. Despite Lori's petite stature, the driver's seat had been adjusted to accommodate someone much larger, a discrepancy too glaring to ignore. Further confounding investigators, a key revelation surfaced during a search of the hacking residence: the discovery of the car keys purportedly found in the park. The incongruity was glaring. How could the keys be within the home if Lori, as Mark had claimed, had departed in the car and never returned? This turn of events immediately raised suspicions about Mark. He claimed that the keys had been left in the ignition when he discovered the car, so he simply took them out and brought them home. While this explanation wasn't enough to detain him, it certainly warranted closer scrutiny from law enforcement. Soon, suspicions about his involvement in his wife's disappearance were substantiated in a most unexpected manner. Overwhelmed by grief, Mark's behavior took a bizarre turn. The day after Lori was reported missing, police received reports of Mark running naked through the city streets, his cries unintelligible. His distraught demeanor and erratic actions prompted a psychiatric evaluation, raising questions about his mental state. While many attributed his breakdown to the stress of his wife's disappearance, police speculated that it could have been a ploy to feign insanity and evade accountability. As Mark underwent psychiatric assessment, investigators obtained permission to conduct a thorough search of the couple's residence. What they discovered painted a chilling picture: traces of blood in the marital bedroom, alongside remnants of stained bedding. Curiously, a new mattress, purchased on the morning of July 19th, the day Lori vanished according to Mark's account, had replaced the old one. Moreover, concealed within the closet lay a sizable kitchen knife, its blade bearing what appeared to be dried blood. But the most damning evidence awaited investigators in the living room. An envelope addressed to Mark lay conspicuously on a table, containing a letter purportedly written by Lori herself. In the letter, Lori accused Mark of betraying her trust throughout their marriage, declaring their need to part ways. This revelation cast a grim shadow over the investigation, suggesting a far darker truth behind Lori's disappearance, one that hinted at betrayal and potential foul play. This revelation finally convinced law enforcement that Mark was directly implicated in his wife's disappearance. The only remaining task was to unravel the events of July 19th. A breakthrough in shedding light on the situation came from Mark's father, Douglas Hacking. According to Douglas, Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah, nor become a certified psychologist. He had been expelled 2 years prior, shortly after marrying Lori. Fearful of disappointing his beloved and his family, Mark continued to masquerade as a student, fabricating assignments and defending his diploma in a charade that snowballed out of control. Mark's confession to his father, made just a month before the tragedy, laid bare the extent of his deceit. He attributed his actions to familial pressure, feeling compelled to match the success of his relatives in the medical field. As the sole breadwinner in their family, Lori remained oblivious to the truth, with Douglas unknowingly enabling Mark by providing financial support. When the time came for Mark to defend his diploma, Douglas arranged an interview at a medical school in North Carolina, only to discover Mark's lack of credentials. Despite Douglas's insistence that Mark come clean to Lori, he persisted in his deception, claiming acceptance to the medical school on the premise of his fictitious psychology degree. Unbeknownst to Mark, Douglas took matters into his own hands and divulged the truth to Lori's sister. Shocked by the revelation, Lori grappled with the betrayal of 2 years' worth of lies from her husband, compounded by the fact that she was carrying his child. Wrestling with her shattered trust, Lori confided in her closest friend, seeking solace and guidance in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. On July 25th, 6 days following Lori's disappearance, Mark, confined to a psychiatric hospital, was visited by his older brothers, where he divulged a chilling confession. He had taken the life of his pregnant wife, Lore, with a .22 caliber rifle. However, he withheld specific details initially, leaving investigators to piece together the grim events that transpired in the Hacking household. During a search of the local hospital's dumpster, authorities uncovered a spring mattress, meticulously cut into pieces, stained with blood and dark hair, an expertise later confirmed to belong to Lori. Mark hinted to his brothers that he had similarly dismembered Lori's body, bagged it, and disposed of it in a dumpster. Despite exhaustive efforts, no trace of her remains surfaced, prompting a massive search of the city's landfill by police and volunteers. Amidst mounting evidence of Mark's culpability, legal complexities loomed. Though law enforcement harbored no doubts regarding his involvement, the absence of a body posed challenges. Nevertheless, on August 2nd, Mark faced formal charges of first-degree murder and obstructing an investigation, leading to his transfer to a mental health facility within the jail. A grim discovery on August 9th marked a critical breakthrough. Human remains were unearthed at the landfill, confirmed through expert examination to be Lori's. Subsequent investigations revealed a harrowing narrative. On July 18th, Lori penned a note to Mark, expressing her intent to divorce him upon discovering his web of lies. Fabrications about his education, aspirations, and reliance on familial support. Unwilling to accept Lori's decision, Mark resorted to an unthinkable act of violence. In the dead of night, as Lori slept, he callously ended her life with a single gunshot to the head. What followed was a calculated effort to conceal his heinous crime, orchestrating a facade of her disappearance. As legal proceedings unfolded, initial plans for seeking the death penalty underscored the gravity of Mark's actions, casting a shadow of justice over a tragic saga of deceit and destruction. For Mark, however, lingering doubts persisted regarding his awareness at the time of the crime. Subsequently, the penalty was revised to life imprisonment. Only in April 2005, under mounting evidence and legal counsel's advisement, did the accused confess to the murder. Yet, he remained unable to articulate a motive for his actions. Tearfully, he lamented Lori's significance in his life, expressing profound fear of losing her. On that fateful night, he claimed to have lost control, seized by a delirium that led him to fatally shoot his pregnant wife as she slept. Mark attributed his mental instability to familial pressures, which he perceived as relentless demands for academic excellence and unattainable standards. Following his university withdrawal, he bore the weight of shame for failing to meet these expectations, spiraling into a web of deceit from which he could not escape. Throughout court proceedings, Mark appeared in a bulletproof vest, facing incessant death threats. On June 6, 2005, the defendant was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, eligible for parole no sooner than 2035. Despite Mark and his legal team's appeals, all attempts to overturn the verdict were fruitless. Upon hearing the verdict, the murderer himself acknowledged the prison as his rightful abode, acknowledging the impossibility of fully atoning for his actions. The consequences of his unfathomable crime reverberated, leaving irreparable scars on the lives of all involved. Lori's family made the poignant decision to erase the name Hacking from her headstone, laying her to rest under her maiden name, Suarez. For Thelma, this symbolic act served to sever ties with the man who had robbed her of her daughter and the promise of a future grandchild. A year into his incarceration, authorities discovered that Hacking was profiting from the sale of personal items, including autographs, palm prints, and even prison letterheads, on an online murder auction website. Upon being interviewed, Hacking voluntarily ceased this activity and expressed remorse for his actions. Remarkably, in the years following his imprisonment, Hacking maintained correspondence with his former mother-in-law, Thelma Suarez. Despite the deep anguish of her loss, Thelma, guided by her faith, extended forgiveness to her son-in-law and endeavored to find solace amidst the enduring pain. The tragic case of Lori Suarez became the focal point of an episode in the television series Escape. It also sparked extensive discussions on various talk shows and documentary projects, including being featured as the inaugural episode of the crime television series Lies Worth Dying For. Furthermore, in 2014, the second season of My Dirty Little Secret dedicated an episode to the murder of Lori Hacking. Additionally, the true crime podcast Sword and Scale delves into the intricate details of the case in its 29th episode. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brianna Zunino. A lot of people are concerned that an autopsy is scheduled today to identify a woman's body that was found in Reno, Nevada on Friday. There is a possibility that it could be the missing college student, Brianna Dennison. The body was found in a field on the edge of the campus of the University of Nevada, which is less than 10 miles from the house where Dennison was last seen in the winter of 2008. Brianna Zunino Dennison, a vibrant 19-year-old college student with a bright future, vanished without a trace, sending shockwaves through the community and igniting a relentless search for answers. As news of Brianna's disappearance spread, an army of volunteers, law enforcement agencies, and concerned citizens came together, determined to bring her home safely. Brianna's family and friends, gripped by fear and uncertainty, clung to hope while sharing stories of her infectious laughter, unwavering spirit, and love for life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as the search intensified. The quest for answers led investigators down a dark and twisted path, uncovering a heinous series of crimes. Law enforcement tirelessly pursued leads, meticulously piecing together the puzzle surrounding Brianna's disappearance. Their dedication and determination remained unwavering in their pursuit of justice. This is the story of Brianna Zunino Dennison, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire. Brianna Zunino Dennison was born on March 29, 1988, to Jeff Dennison and Bridget Dennison. Her mother lovingly called her Breezy because she reminded her of a refreshing breeze on a cool summer day. When Brianna was 6 years old, her father passed away, which was a difficult time for the family, as the loss of a loved one always is. However, she persevered through the pain with the support of her loved ones. She spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and her mother's native town of Mendocino, California. Brianna's passion for traveling and world cultures took her to Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. She studied abroad in Rome, Italy, for a year with her family. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life became part of her radiant personality. Brianna was raised in a tradition that valued children as the most precious possessions. Her relatives and close friends instilled in her the importance of being a loving, spiritual, respectful, and trusting human being. She had a deep affection for children and animals, particularly her dog, Ozzy. Brianna graduated from Reno High School in 2006 and was a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College, where she was majoring in child psychology. On January 20, 2008, Brianna returned home to Reno from sunny Santa Barbara during the winter break to visit some friends and family. She and her friends had attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a travel agency that catered to students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno, which Brianna had reportedly attended in the past. On that specific day, she was last observed alive at approximately 4 a.m. Pacific time at her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus on McKay Court in Reno. She had gone there to sleep after attending a party at the Sands Regency on North Arlington Avenue. When her friend woke up the next morning around 9 a.m., Brianna was nowhere to be found. A small blood stain was noticed on the pillow where Brianna had slept that night, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were all left at the house, which prompted her friend to alert Brianna's parents and local authorities. When investigators arrived, they assessed the crime scene. In the following days, detectives conducted a forensic investigation of the McKay Court residence where Brianna was staying when she was abducted. They found DNA on a doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The investigators were able to confirm that the blood on the pillow belonged to Brianna and began focusing on a kidnapping scenario. The detectives began searching the University of Nevada Reno area for Brianna, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the search efforts. The DNA found on the doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was linked to at least 2 sexually motivated attacks in the same area in the previous months, one on November 13th and the second on December 16, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a woman from Reno claimed that she knew another victim who had revealed that she was raped at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada Reno campus in October 2007. However, the victim had not reported the crime. The investigators released a description of the potential suspected perpetrator based on this information, which was considered a positive lead. Identifiers used by women who had been sexually assaulted by the suspect were used to track down the perpetrator. The detectives began interviewing nearly 100 registered sex offenders who live within a mile of the McKay Court home, but none seemed to be responsible for Brianna's disappearance. Around 1,700 people, including Nevada's then First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, wife of then Governor Jim Gibbons, volunteered to participate in a physical search of a 100-square-mile area to find Brianna, who went missing, but to no avail. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez in Reno was just returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant. As he was walking by the road, he noticed bright orange-colored fabrics standing out among a pile of discarded tree limbs lying in a ditch near a Reno business park. When he approached closer, he discovered neon orange socks which were attached to feet, which at first he thought was a mannequin, but later turned out to be a woman. Jimenez had heard about Brianna Dennison's kidnapping, but didn't think the victim resembled the photographs he had seen on billboards. Jimenez did not have a mobile phone, so he promptly returned to his workplace, EE Technologies, to call the Reno police. When the police arrived at the South Reno lot, Jimenez was informed that the victim was Brianna Dennison, as an autopsy report had confirmed that the body found in a field near a Reno business park was hers. Brianna had been assaulted and killed. A piece of underwear was also found near Brianna's body, along with DNA evidence from the perpetrator and an unknown female. The police believed that the underwear did not belong to Brianna and might have been left there to taunt the investigators. The police then asked anyone who recognized the underwear as theirs to come forward, as they might have information about the perpetrator's identity, but no one came forward. On January 29, 2008, the Reno police released a description of the unknown perpetrator. The person in question was also linked to at least 2 sexual assaults in November and December 2007, and a woman claimed to have been raped in a parking lot in October. previous victims had provided enough detailed information for the police to sketch a suspect. An item of underwear was found near Dennison's body, along with the killer's DNA and the DNA of an unidentified woman. The police stated that the item of clothing did not belong to Dennison and may have been left near her body to taunt the investigators. The police are asking anyone who recognizes the item of clothing as theirs to come forward, as they may know the identity of the perpetrator. On Tuesday, November 25, 2008, 27-year-old James Michael Bella from Sparks, Nevada, was arrested and taken into custody at the Washoe County Jail. He was charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Bella was apprehended while he was dropping off his son at the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. Bella had already provided the police with a DNA sample collected from a doorknob in Brianna's friend's house. The detectives also discovered that Bella was a former Marine and had been previously arrested in 2001 for threatening his former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. On Wednesday, November 26, 2008, during a press conference held by the Reno Police Department, it was confirmed that the DNA collected from Bella matched the DNA found at the crime scene, positively linking him to the murder of Brianna Dennison and a previous sexual assault. It was also revealed that a friend of his girlfriend had turned in Bella via the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after Bella's girlfriend had confided to this friend that she had found underwear unknown to her in Bella's truck as they were coming back from Washington State, where Bella had taken a job in March 2008. News media reports of Brianna's case, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle used in another rape the month before Brianna's abduction, began circulating. Bella was questioned by detectives about his atrocity after the secret witness tip came in, but he denied his involvement and declined to provide a DNA sample. Bella's girlfriend was also questioned and gave police permission to obtain DNA from her 4-year-old son, whom Bella had fathered. The test confirmed that his direct relative, Bella in this case, had left a DNA sample collected at the home where Brianna Dennison was abducted and at the other rape that had taken place the prior month. On his way to Washington, it was also revealed that Bella had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the previous sexual assault. At the press conference, officials mentioned that the vehicle was being returned to Reno to be searched and used as evidence in the case against him. On Thursday, May 27, 2010, Bella was found guilty of the murder of Brianna Dennison, and after deliberating for about 9 hours, the jury returned a guilty verdict for all counts against Bella, which included kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The defense attorneys argued against the death penalty, stating that Bella suffered an abusive childhood due to an alcoholic father, that he had been a productive member of society before his crimes, and that he was a model prisoner. However, the jurors did not accept these mitigating factors and handed out the death sentence. On July 30, 2010, Bella was sentenced to 4 additional life sentences for multiple counts of rape and kidnapping associated with attacks on 2 victims before Brianna's abduction and murder. Over the years, Bella's appeals have been denied. The story of Brianna Zunino Dennison is one of resilience, heartbreak, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Brianna's family, who faced unimaginable pain and uncertainty, stood strong in their fight for justice. Their unwavering determination became a beacon of hope for others facing similar tragedies. The legacy of Brianna's story reaches far beyond her case. It has sparked crucial conversations, inspired community initiatives, and brought awareness to the issues of violence and safety. Law enforcement's tireless efforts ultimately led to the apprehension and conviction of the individual responsible for Brianna's abduction and murder. Their dedication and unwavering commitment to finding justice showcase the power of teamwork and determination. As we remember Brianna, we hold on to the memories of her vibrant spirit, her love for life, and the impact she had on those who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and standing up against violence. In the end, Brianna Zunino Dennison's legacy will live on not only through the love of her family and friends, but through the collective efforts to create a safer world for others. May her memory continue to inspire change and hope. Rest in peace, Brianna Zunino Dennison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chris Watts. Shanann Razuchek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3rd, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shanann and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed two daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her co-worker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and two daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shannan's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shannan was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shannan and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shannan's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shannan and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shannan and Chris's home, the officer found Shannan's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shannan's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shannan's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannan's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannan or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shannan hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannan's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shannan might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shannan and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shannan during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shannan, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shannan. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shannan and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shannan's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shannan was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shannan emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shannan, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shannan's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shannan was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shannan's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shannan was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shannan in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shannan's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Humans are inherently doubtful and covetous beings. When confronted with perfection, their instinct is to seek out imperfections. In the absence of any, they often endeavor to fabricate them. The calamity to be recounted today was observed by a vast audience, yet no one was able to assist the seemingly flawless girl, who as a result became handicapped. Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Chinese Harvard, was hosting a distinguished performance in partnership with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. This event held significant prominence. Gracefully attired pairs made their entrance into the majestic theater. Men in impeccably cut black suits adorned with gleaming cufflinks, and women in stunning full-length gowns clutching petite handbags. They exchanged smiles and engaged in polite conversations as they proceeded to their seats. Tsinghua University students poised to showcase their talent that evening faced immense pressure. One student, Ju Ling, was confronting an especially daunting challenge. She was about to deliver a 6-minute solo, poised to be the defining 6 minutes of her life. The audience potentially included professors, prospective future employers, and benefactors, all key figures for her career prospects. Heightening the stakes, any error or mishap was not an option. She needed to captivate them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. Her goal was to immerse herself in the rhythm and embody the essence of the ancient Chinese musical instrument, the jiqin. Revered as the instrument of the wise and favored by literati and intellectuals, those who mastered it were invariably seen as genial and perceptive. The jiqin, a symbol of prestige, boasts a rich history. One of these venerable instruments from the Song dynasty fetched $22 million, ranking it among the most valuable. To soothe Ling's nerves, numerous friends positioned themselves near the stage, their anxiety nearly matching hers, having witnessed all she had endured over the past 2 months. For this moment, Zhu Ling's entire existence up to now had been devoted to these 6 minutes. She had almost jeopardized her well-being for this event. Her nerves were so frayed that in 3 days preceding her solo, she scarcely consumed any food. Stress-induced stomach pains plagued her, and sleep was elusive, making it hard for her to keep her eyes. Her vision began to blur. Finally, Zhu Ling ascended the stage, greeted the audience with a bow, sat down, and commenced playing the guqin. In those initial moments, her friends held their breath. But soon, the tension eased, and they found themselves enveloped in the music. Zhu Ling's stage presence that evening betrayed no sign of her nerves. She seemed to become one with the melody. Her hands glided effortlessly, coaxing out exquisite sounds that resonated throughout the theater. Some of her friends were even brought to tears. It appeared that Zhu Ling had channeled all her accumulated stress and anxiety of the past 2 months into her performance, transforming it into a form of emotional release. As the 6 minutes concluded, the audience burst into applause. Zhu Ling gave a deep bow, offered a smile, and exited the stage. Unbeknownst to her, her best friend was in the crowd smiling broadly and clapping so vigorously that her hands turned red. Yet her expression also showed a hint of nervousness. That night, Zhu Ling opted out of the festivities to return home and rest. The dissipation of stress left her feeling utterly drained. In the shower, she began washing her hair calmly. Glancing at her hand, she noticed a clump of hair passing through it. Running her hand through her hair again brought a sense of urgency. She pulled back the shower curtain and dashed to the mirror. Her reflection revealed an exhausted face and small irregular bald spots resembling the aftermath of a carelessly wielded razor. This was merely the onset. In the following weeks, Zhu Ling's condition would deteriorate further, leaving her confined to a wheelchair and bereft of ability, unable to move, speak, or even control facial muscles. She transformed from a highly promising Tsinghua University student into someone with the cognitive capacity of a 6-year-old child. This entire wasn't an illness, nor was it a genetic anomaly. Zhu Ling was experiencing something caused by another individual. For ordinary students, gaining admission to Harvard was more likely than to Tsinghua, especially for those native to China. The local acceptance rate stands at a mere 0.4%, making it more accessible to international students. The university operates on an annual budget of $5 billion. It's an institution where influential political figures' daughters and wealthy businessmen's sons receive their education. Each of them is exceptionally intelligent and well-educated, with high intellectual capacities. The real challenge isn't just in securing admission, it's surviving the intense competition and rivalry among the students. Some alumni have admitted that to stay at the forefront, they engaged in various manipulations, betraying comrades, engaging in deceit, and stabbing others in the back, all driven by the unyielding competitive spirit fostered at this institution. In 1994, Zhou Ling was among the 31 chemistry undergraduates at Tsinghua University. She ranked in the top 3 of her cohort, which consisted of 20 males and 11 females. Zhu Ling was often regarded as the epitome of excellence, the cream of the crop among students. Indeed, Zhu Ling was not only intelligent, but also tall and striking in appearance. Everyone foresaw a bright future for her, destined for significant accomplishments. Zhu Ling also had a charismatic and assured presence. Her arrival in the dormitory sparked envy among others. She had a knack for attracting a circle of friends and admirers, thanks to her warm demeanor towards others. She roamed the campus, attended lectures diligently, completed her assignments, and many marveled at her seemingly boundless energy. However, after a few months, a peculiar and unexplainable decline in Juling's condition began to be observed by all. She appeared less strained, even during graduation week. But suddenly, Juling seemed to vanish. She began arriving later than her peers and consistently looked exhausted in lectures. Sitting there, she'd sweat as if overheating. Juling struggled to concentrate on the class content. Severe stomach pain plagued her, leading many, including her instructors, to believe it was stress-related. Seeking relief, Juling went to the school clinic for pain relievers, but they provided minimal respite. What started as minor lateness escalated to her ceasing classes entirely. Concerned friends decided to visit her dormitory, which she shared with 3 other girls. They found her in bed, shivering and moaning in agony, with clumps of dark hair scattered on the pillow. Alarmed, her classmates urged her to consult a physician, but Juling dismissed their concerns. She insisted she was merely stressed and would return to classes the next day, assuring them that everything would normalize by semester's end. The once impeccable Juling was now unrecognizable. Her complexion had turned ghostly pale, lips took on a purplish tint. She resembled a specter haunting the campus. Her movements were sluggish. Each step seemed to inflict excruciating pain. Most of her hair had shed, leaving her nearly bald and compelling her always to wear something on her head for concealment. Occasionally, Juling's vision would blur, leading to temporary blindness for hours at a time. Various hypotheses regarding Juling's deteriorating condition spread across campus. Some conjectured it might be due to illnesses like cancer or alopecia, known for causing hair loss, or perhaps an autoimmune disorder. Yet darker speculations emerged. Many students linked Juling's decline to stress stemming from a dispute with her close friend Sunny. It seemed oddly coincidental that the change in Juling coincided with their falling out. After missing an orchestra rehearsal for a challenging piece, Juling faced unexpectedly harsh criticism. Sunny Fly informed the instructor that Juling had skipped because she felt overly skilled, implying the others needed to elevate their abilities to match hers. Realizing such maliciousness in real life was quite overwhelming for Juling. Different speculations circulated among university students. Some hinted that Juling, being a chemistry student, might be secretly conducting groundbreaking experiments. However, would a highly driven student risk self-harm? Bajan A, from Paying University and a friend since middle school, decided to visit her in the hospital with a fruit basket. On entering her room, Bajan was stunned and compelled to flee. It wasn't fear of infection, but rather seeing his classmate in such a dire state that overwhelmed him. How could a vibrant 20-year-old transform into this shadow so quickly? What illness could strip Juling of all she had worked for? The medical team found her condition baffling. Just months earlier, Juling had been in peak health. Now she lay almost hairless, connected to multiple machines with tubes protruding from her nose and mouth. Her body convulsed and face showed partial paralysis. A look of silent desperation marked her wide eyes. The sight was distressing. Even the slightest touch caused excruciating pain and more erratic movements. It seemed even her hospital gown tormented her skin. Sensing his friend's silent plea for help, Bajan read the desperate message in her eyes, a look he would never forget. Seeking answers alongside Juling's parents, Bajan probed the doctors for a diagnosis, but they were equally perplexed. They delved into the onset of her illness. Initially, about a month or 2 earlier, Juling experienced stomach aches, resembling spasms which came and went unpredictably within a week. The pain intensified to the point that it forced her to bend over in agony. Often, she would lay on the ground curled up in a fetal position. Initially, her remedy involved consuming large amounts of Chinese herbal tea. Yet, the pain escalated, eventually causing her to lose consciousness. Juling Ling, burdened by her demanding university schedule, delayed seeking medical attention, hoping the symptoms would subside. Then, her vision began failing intermittently, first blurring and then completely vanishing for hours. Subsequently, her hair started falling out, an especially traumatic symptom for any young woman. The situation deteriorated further, leading to her hospitalization just days before Christmas. It was her first time in hospital care. During that month, her parents remained steadfast by her side as she received treatment. The medical team tested her for arsenic and mercury poisoning. However, the results showed nothing abnormal. Intriguingly, a doctor from a different hospital recalled a similar poisoning case from the 1960s and suggested the possibility of thallium poisoning. However, Zhu Lingling denied any exposure to thallium in her studies. The hospital then reached out to Tsinghua University to investigate which chemical substances Zhu Lingling might have encountered in her capacity as a chemistry student. Despite this inquiry, her medical records revealed no exposure to chemicals that could trigger such symptoms. This left her condition an enigma to the medical staff. Remarkably, after a month, Zhu Ling's health appeared to improve, and she requested permission to resume her studies. She was eager to sit for exams and anxious not to waste the entire semester. Her parents were adamantly opposed to her returning to university, fearing that stress was the underlying cause of her illness. Yet, Zhu Ling feigned significant recovery and went back to classes in February. Unfortunately, by March, her condition had deteriorated dramatically again, resulting in readmission to the hospital. This time, so debilitated that continued university attendance seemed impossible. She couldn't even speak. Jen, disillusioned with the local medical community's inability to provide answers, took the initiative. He reached out to medical experts not just in China, but globally. Zhu Ling's symptoms were translated in various languages, and he posted these on specialized medical forums online. In less than half an hour, he received his response. Over the next few days, around 2,000 emails poured in from 18 different countries. The respondents weren't mere internet users. Many were affiliated with national medical institutions and specialized in toxicology. The consensus among almost all of them was alarming: thallium poisoning. The symptoms pointed to a deliberate, methodical attempt to poison Zhu Ling, designed to inflict slow, excruciating agony. Thallium, a dense and highly poisonous metal, was once used in rat poisons, but has been banned in major countries including China and the USA. In the early 20th century, it was used as a lice treatment, known to cause hair loss. Its array of symptoms is so vast that it often leads to misdiagnosis by doctors, and its detection is usually alarmingly delayed. Thallium doesn't leave visible marks like bruises or wounds, making it harder to spot. The poisoning unfolds in stages. Initial stomach discomfort escalates to severe pain, then trembling, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. Subsequently, the victim experiences intense skin pain, akin to severe burns, where even the slightest touch feels excruciating. Clothing and bed linens become sources of torment. The final stage involves neurological symptoms, including involuntary motor disturbances, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis, culminating in cognitive decline and mental impairment. Tragically, in Zhu Ling's case, this meant a regression from a top student at China's most prestigious university to possessing the mental capacities of a 6-year-old child. BG Jen, in collaboration with Zhu Ling's parents, sifted through the multitude of emails and promptly conveyed their findings to Zhu Ling's medical team. Yet the doctors were skeptical of the diagnosis posited by online contributors. They emphasized that detecting thallium in the body without specific tests was not feasible. Testing for thallium involved sending the patient's blood to a lab equipped for such an analysis. Moreover, they pointed out that thallium is a rare, tightly controlled substance, not easily obtainable. The doctors also mentioned that if Zhu Ling's condition was indeed due to thallium poisoning, an antidote would likely be ineffective at this advanced stage of the disease. This revelation left Zhu Ling's family and friends in shock. The pressing question then became, who would want to harm Zhu Ling? A hypothesis emerged that the intended targets might have been her parents, given their high-profile occupations. Her father was a senior engineer at the national agency, a position that could involve sensitive information. Her mother was an engineer at a prominent Chinese company. However, this line of inquiry eventually reached a dead end. The primary task was to determine how the poison entered Zhuling's system, especially since no one else on campus exhibited similar symptoms. This ruled out the possibility of thallium vapors, suggesting that Zhuling either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, during Zhuling's hospitalization, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included her shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, bath soap, and even her water glass. Intriguingly, the perpetrator seemed solely interested in Zhuling's possessions, an unusual incident in such a prestigious university's dormitory. With no surveillance cameras on campus at that time, an investigation was imperative. Students lived in gender-specific rooms, and access to the women's dormitory was restricted to current female students of Singer University. Neither alumni nor graduate students or professors had entry into the living quarters of over 100 young female students. Police initiated a thorough investigation into over 20 vendors known to supply thallium, a substance still used in manufacturing optical lenses, electronics, and other products. Scrutinizing their procurement records, they discovered that one supplier had provided alum to Tsinghua University's chemistry department for research. The investigation revealed that only a select group within the university had access to this compound: 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 senior undergraduates. Consequently, the perpetrator likely had a role in thallium-based experiments and had the opportunity to take personal items from Zhuling's room. As the investigation progressed, the professors and graduate students were quickly excluded as suspects due to their lack of access to the women's dormitory. This narrowed suspicion to the 2 senior students, 1 male and 1 female. Since the male student couldn't have entered the female residence area, suspicion fell on the female student. Astonishingly, this student was none other than Sunwei, also known as Sunny. She was not only Zhuling's best friend and roommate, but now the prime suspect in her attempted murder. The situation posed a baffling question. Why would Sunny, with a bright future ahead, risk everything in such a serious manner? Acquaintances of both young women mentioned that Zhuling had recently triumphed over Sunny in the student elections. Sunny was not known for tolerating defeat gracefully. She possessed an argumentative nature and had deceived her closest companion on several occasions. As Zhuling advanced and received greater acclaim, Sunny grew progressively more agitated. Zhuling's individual performance at the Beijing Philharmonic served as a catalyst for tension in their relationship. Zhuling was attractive, highly skilled, and esteemed by both peers and faculty members alike. This probably fueled Sunny's jealousy even more. Sunwei was questioned for 8 hours straight before her parents came to take her home. Her family had significant influence at Tsinghua University. Her father played a key role in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee, and her grandfather was a former vice chairman. Many of her relatives held positions in government or academic roles at top state universities. Consequently, Zhuling's case remained unresolved for quite some time. Sunwei, one of the primary individuals associated with the incident, maintained her innocence. She claimed that the police had cleared her of any suspicion. Regardless, Sunwei legally changed her name and birth date, married an American, and relocated to the US, where she lived without restrictions. Meanwhile, Ling's diagnosis came too late. It was eventually confirmed that thallium had caused her mysterious illness. By the time it was detected, the levels of thallium in her body were extraordinarily high. The antidote, Prussian blue, proved ineffective due to the advanced stage of poisoning. Ling was declared permanently disabled with irreversible nerve damage. She now has a child's mental capacity, experiences facial paralysis, and is bound to a wheelchair. Later on, Ling's family received $14,000 from the hospital due to misdiagnosis and mishandling of her case. The closure of the case by the police occurred quietly, without notifying Ling's family, which only added to their tragedy and suspicions. Zhuling lived until she was 50 years old before passing away. Her parents found solace in the fact that she could live so long in such a state. Unfortunately, the individual responsible for her condition was never brought to justice. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with two siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building, where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m. when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground, who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled, based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes, with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there, in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time, in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against, so investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early, and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees, where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car they thought the attacker had fled in, detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seemed the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school, and the killer remained at large with no known identity, added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately, no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, the police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance, it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police were struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects, but all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company, inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages, and the experts' capabilities were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections, and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress, as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and two men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified two new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, but his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence, just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him, as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered, and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless, in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalie Connolly. In the picturesque English countryside, a story of love and betrayal took a tragic turn, leaving a young mother's life in jeopardy. This is the story of Natalie Connolly, a tale of domestic abuse, resilience, and the pursuit of justice amidst unimaginable cruelty. Natalie, a devoted mother and partner, found herself trapped in a cycle of abuse that would culminate in a harrowing ordeal. Her story stands as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking behind closed doors and the courage required to break free from the shackles of domestic violence. Natalie Connolly was a captivating beauty, both in appearance and charm. Her identical twin sister shared her lovely looks and deep connection. Natalie had a natural talent for bringing joy to others, easily sparking laughter and engaging in conversation with everyone she met. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Natalie was wholly devoted to ensuring her daughter Madison had everything she needed. Natalie's unwavering dedication as a mother was evident in her constant presence and adoration for Madison, which fostered a strong admiration from her daughter. In a bustling bar, Natalie met John, a charming and debonair man who immediately caught her eye. Their connection was instantaneous, drawn together by an undeniable magnetic pull. Despite John being in his late 30s, his charm and wit quickly captivated Natalie's heart. Before long, they exchanged contact details, eager to explore their budding connection and spend more time together. Natalie found herself irresistibly attracted to John from the moment they met, though initially unaware of his occupation or wealth. As they grew closer, John revealed his status as a multi-millionaire, a fact reinforced by his extravagant displays of affection. Lavish gifts flowed freely from his generous hand, and their evenings together were filled with luxurious dinners at high-end restaurants. His opulent mansion seemed to be plucked from a fairy tale, leaving Natalie spellbound by his refined and gentlemanly demeanor. Contrary to the charming facade John projected, he harbored a trove of hidden truths. It soon came to light that John's life was far more complex than he had let on. Amidst his engagement to a pregnant partner, with whom he anticipated their second child, John concealed the existence of 3 additional children. His involvement with Natalie was revealed to be an affair that persisted even as he navigated the dissolution of his prior relationship, ultimately choosing to redirect his focus towards her. Their romance unfolded like pages from a fairy tale from the onset. John and Madison formed an instant bond, while Natalie effortlessly won over John's children, showering her with lavish gifts and luxuries like spa days and a personal chauffeur. John seemed to fulfill every dream imaginable, yet amidst the opulence, reality set in. When Natalie moved in with John on his estate in Kinver, Staffordshire, England, their relationship was initially fueled by passion. However, living together revealed the true nature of their dynamic. True understanding emerges when you share every aspect of your daily lives. John's preferences leaned heavily towards the rougher side, reminiscent of scenes from the 50 Shades of Grey series, much to Natalie's discomfort. He derived pleasure from causing her pain during intimate moments, often leaving visible evidence of his aggression in the form of bruises and cuts. The extravagant dinners and romantic gestures began to lose their appeal when Natalie realized the steep emotional cost they came with. What once seemed like a fairy tale now bore the stark reality of a tumultuous relationship. Despite her reservations, Natalie reluctantly acquiesced to John's demands during their intense encounters, driven by a fear of abandonment similar to what he had done to his pregnant ex-fiancée. Despite struggling with this significant issue, she found contentment within the relationship and hesitated to leave, fearing a return to the monotony of her previous life. Seeking solace and guidance, she confided in her sister and mother, revealing the wounds and bruises that bore witness to John's violent tendencies during their intense sexual encounters. While acknowledging John's prowess in the bedroom, she also disclosed the distressing reality of his penchant for inflicting pain. Natalie found herself torn between the pleasure John provided and the harm he caused. She was caught in a dilemma, struggling to reconcile her desire to maintain the lavish lifestyle with John and her dissatisfaction with the intimate aspect of their relationship. Signs of strain became apparent as both Natalie and John sought connections outside their partnership. John engaged in conversations with other women, while Natalie also found herself messaging other men. When John uncovered Natalie's exchanges, his reaction was one of fury. While he didn't hesitate to pursue interactions with women himself, he vehemently opposed Natalie's involvement with other men, revealing a glaring double standard in their relationship dynamic. However, he remained silent, masking any signs of unease. On December 18, 2016, John proposed what seemed like a normal evening together: drinks, watching a football game, and sharing supper. He ensured Natalie had an abundance of alcohol and even provided cocaine, though to a lesser extent than he consumed himself. This wasn't the first time he had orchestrated such a scenario, suggesting a pattern of behavior aimed at loosening her up before subjecting her to his despicable actions once they were alone at home. Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions may have been an attempt to numb herself to the anticipated pain she knew she would endure once behind closed doors with John. For him, maintaining absolute control was paramount, ensuring he could fully indulge in his intentions towards Natalie without compromising his faculties. He meticulously regulated his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a state of mild intoxication that wouldn't impede his actions during their sexual encounters. Following a seemingly delightful day out, culminating in a satisfying meal at one of their favorite establishments, John arranged for their driver to transport them home. However, beneath the facade of normalcy lurked John's sinister and malevolent intentions for that day. Natalie's intoxication was clearly evident. and the meal had not helped sober her up or absorb the alcohol. Disoriented, she stumbled out of the car upon their arrival home, inadvertently leaving her phone behind. The responsible course of action would have been to provide her with water and guide her to bed to sleep it off. However, John Broadhurst had far darker intentions in mind. Upon the driver's return with Natalie's phone, it remains unclear whether John accessed her messages. Subsequent toxicological testing and autopsy results painted a grim picture of Natalie's state. Despite her incapacitation, John was resolute in his desire for retribution, disregarding any potential consequences. Natalie became the unwilling recipient of his brutal advances, as he orchestrated her suffering to inflict maximum harm. He subjected her to a barrage of violence, including punches, kicks, stomps, and the act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To compound her agony, he used a bottle of carpet cleaner as a weapon, twisting and tearing at her. Once he had finished his cruel assault, he abandoned Natalie, naked and blooded, at the base of the stairs, her skirt pulled up around her waist, left to succumb to her injuries. She lay in a pool of her own blood as John callously retreated to bed. Hours later, upon awakening, he discovered Natalie lifeless, having succumbed to the numerous horrific wounds inflicted upon her, totaling a staggering 40. John's subsequent actions, including his unconvincing performance during the emergency call for an ambulance, revealed his warped psychological state. His detachment and lack of remorse were chillingly evident as he casually informed the operator of his futile attempts at CPR, referring to Natalie's lifeless state with callous indifference. Following Natalie's pronounced death, he was apprehended by authorities. In a feeble attempt to justify his heinous deeds, he offered the excuse of rough sex gone too far, claiming innocence and alleging that Natalie had actively consented to the extreme acts inflicted upon her. According to John's twisted narrative, Natalie purportedly requested the injuries, the violence, and even the insertion of the carpet cleaning bottle into her body, and she purportedly reassured him amidst the blood and pain. He claimed that she reassured him of her well-being and expressed a desire for more of the same, painting himself as a mere pawn in her tragic demise. John attempted to deflect responsibility by asserting that Natalie willingly participated in rough sexual activities, claiming they had engaged in similar encounters numerous times without issue. When questioned about leaving her partially clothed at the foot of the stairs, he offered the feeble excuse that it was a routine occurrence and that he had never provided blankets, as the house was consistently warm throughout the proceedings. John displayed a notable absence of remorse or contrition, instead placing blame squarely on Natalie's shoulders. Despite being found guilty of manslaughter, he received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, serving only 22 months before regaining his freedom. The Natalie Connolly case sparked widespread criticism, leading Fiona Mackenzie to launch the "We Can't Consent to This" movement. Mackenzie aims to ignite discussions on sexual assault and eliminate the rough sex defense, which trivializes violence in relationships. However, some still accept the court's decision, viewing it as an isolated incident rather than a systemic issue, risking victim blaming. This highlights the need for advocacy and education to challenge harmful narratives and support survivors. The rough sex murder defense was unequivocally prohibited with the passage of the Domestic Abuse Bill by Parliament on July 6, 2020, following the granting of royal assent on April 29, 2021. The Domestic Abuse Act of 2021 represents a crucial step forward in addressing and combating domestic violence, ensuring that perpetrators can no longer exploit such harmful defenses to justify their actions. Natalie's untimely death left a profound void in the lives of her family and friends, who continue to grapple with the pain of her loss. Their unwavering love and support for Natalie serve as a testament to her enduring spirit. In the aftermath, the community rallied together to raise awareness about domestic abuse and to support survivors in their journey towards healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion stand as a beacon of hope in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Though Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. May her story inspire us to stand against domestic abuse and to offer support to those in need. Monday, September 14, 2015, was remembered by 16-year-old Nolan Buchanan as the best day of his life. The day before, he had spent Sunday with his girlfriend. A traditional morning mass with his girlfriend's family, followed by a get-together with friends and a wonderfully romantic evening. Waking up on Monday morning, next to his favorite girl, the teenager felt like a free, successful, and influential businessman before whom the whole world is open. After all, he was now the owner of Buchanan Construction. The young man was going to inherit cars, a house, land, monetary assets, and made plans how he would manage the family business alone, and certainly do it better than his father, who brought the company to bankruptcy. It would seem that what could go wrong? Already on October 1, 2015, Nolan Keith Buchanan was arrested at Bonita High School in Bonita, California, by the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. Nolan was incarcerated at the Juvenile Treatment Center, JTC, in South Lake Tahoe until June 13, 2018, when an El Dorado County jury of 7 men and 5 women found Buchanan guilty of 3 charges. The jury took just 2 hours to reach a verdict. The young man was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole from the 25th year of his sentence. This is how his plan to take over the family business ended. Neighbors and classmates spoke of Nolan as a model kid and a good student. "As far as I know, he was a good kid," Bonita High School student Campbell Ruxton would later say in an interview. "He always cared about school, he seemed very kind, he was very nice. I'm even surprised he was arrested." But what really happened in the Buchanan family? Let's break down this horrific case in detail. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she came to apply for a job at his firm as an office manager. By the time they met, Adam was already divorced and raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Cheerful, sociable, and cheerful blonde immediately attracted the attention of the owner of the company. The interest was mutual. Molly fell in love, started a romance that turned into a serious relationship, and her move to Adam. Molly dreamed of a real, loving, friendly family and tried to build a wonderful relationship with her stepson. Soon she became pregnant. Gavin was born. People who knew the Buchanans claimed that they were a fairly close-knit family of 4. The head of the family, who owned a construction company, earned enough to ensure a comfortable life, and the family even purchased vacation property in El Dorado County, California. A small cabin sat on 19 acres in Greenwood, a rustic cabin with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, took an active role in remodeling the house, and the family began to visit there often. On September 13, 2015 at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township in western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property. A cabin located on the property was still smoldering, but had burned to the ground. The fire department personnel observed charred remains in the ashes. The scene of the fire was not touched, and at 11 a.m. firefighters called the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. No one had yet realized what was at the scene. Firefighters were almost certain that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped in the house. The arriving coroner was faced with a daunting task. The remains of the house were still smoldering, and there was no way to examine the inside of the house. They had to wait for the flames to finally die down and for the temperature to drop slightly. As the coroner examined the house, he smelled the sweet odor of burnt flesh and later discovered a human skull and a burned chest. It appeared that the tragedy had claimed someone's life. The officer requested backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived and conducted a thorough examination of the scene. The conclusion was obvious. The small, secluded and remote cabin was not the primary residence of its owners. Rather, it was most likely a country cabin where people came to vacation. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the property adjacent to the cabin. It was possible to run the license plates and find out who the car belonged to. The owner may have been the victim of the wildfire. It didn't take long to find out that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by a man named Adam Buchanan. The man in question lived 160 miles from the scene of the accident, about 3 hours away in Bonita, California. This information confirmed the assumption of the police, who decided that the house was just a country residence for those who vacation here from the hustle and bustle of the city. It remained to be seen who was inside, Mr. Buchanan himself or someone else. The name of the owner of the company gave the detectives their first clue, with which they began their investigation. The Bonita police officers were tasked with checking to see if all of Buchanan's family members were well and at home. They went to the correct address and were soon in the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. At a knock on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage came out. He greeted the uniformed officers with surprise and asked what brought them to him. The officers decided to first find out who was in the house so as not to frighten the household. Perhaps the company car had been taken by someone from the company and not the owner himself. Nolan Buchanan said his father Adam had gone away for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, and they were due back in the evening. According to him, his father had left him to look after the house. Investigators did not yet have sufficient reason to believe the remains in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information received and the discovery of the remains, believed to be those of 2 people, by the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing in the El Dorado County fire. The next day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to Nolan's home to talk to him more thoroughly and try to figure out whose lives the fire had claimed. Officers were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They said that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, does his own home repairs and therefore travels there very often. The parents were very concerned as they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until now. From the story, the officers learned that the house is connected to generators, but at the time of the tragedy, it had no electricity. There were, however, gas cylinders inside. This gave 2 theories. The fire could have been either accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire scene had cooled down and investigators were finally able to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. According to Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office, new remains were discovered that changed the direction of the case. Police found a piece of skull with a bullet hole. At that point, we all realized that there was actually a homicide. This was not an accidental fire, reported the sheriff. The remains were collected and sent for forensic DNA testing. In the first set of remains, the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull with the bullet hole, judging by its size, belonged to a child. The version of fatal accident dropped by itself. The version of murder came to the forefront. No one now doubted that the fire was a means of destroying the traces of the crime. It remained to find out under what circumstances the crime had taken place. Was it a burglary that had gone wrong? Or had the family taken their lives deliberately? But then by whom and why? Or could the crime be related to Buchanan Construction, a company where Adam Buchanan was president and chief operating officer, and someone harbored a grudge against him due to a working relationship? Initially, investigators focused specifically on the latter theory. They also looked into Molly's life to determine if she had any enemies capable of the crime. Once those lines of inquiry stalled, officers turned their attention to problems in Molly and Adam's marriage. There proved to be plenty of them. Investigators learned that over time, Molly and Adam's relationship began to deteriorate, and at the time of the crime, they had been sleeping apart for quite some time. A diary was found in which Molly described abuse from Adam. Witnesses interviewed described rough treatment and abuse. According to them, Adam was rude not only to Molly, but also to the children. Molly's mother, Susie Slankard, admitted to investigators, "There were times when I was afraid they would kill each other in one of their arguments." Molly did not sever her relationship with Adam, but would periodically take her son and leave to go to her parents' house and return a few days later until the next fight. It also turned out that the couple liked to hunt in the area where their country house was located. Since everyone was armed, the investigators assumed that during another quarrel, one of the spouses grabbed a gun and shot, and when he realized what he had done, he took his own life. However, there was an inconsistency. If the tragedy happened because of a conflict between husband and wife, it means that near the remains of one of them must necessarily be the instrument of crime, which, however, was not. Investigators speculated that the weapon may have been damaged in the fire and may not have looked as obvious as expected. Over the course of 5 days, forensic team members took turns removing ashes from the home. The search was conducted with surgical thoroughness, but did not yield the expected result. No weapons were found in the house. By this time came the data of forensic examination. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds before the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the version that someone took their own life. The lack of firearms meant that someone else was in the house. A 4th person who shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start over. Police had no choice but to turn to the 16-year-old son of the deceased. Nolan told officers that the family drove away in an old Dodge truck. According to the son, his father decided to use the company vehicle rather than his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded the truck and trailer with rocks that he was going to decorate the area near his country cabin. It was this truck that police found near the burned structure. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, the young man, as in the first interview, said that he had a duty to look after the house and garden during the absence of his father and stepmother. Nolan also said that they had a neighbor growing forbidden grass on the edge of the Buchanan property, which caused his father to have frequent arguments with this neighbor, demanding that he stop planting the grass and threatening to go to the police. Talking about the family business, Nolan told of the company's financial difficulties. Things were not going well. The company was undergoing downsizing and the number of employees was down to 5. From what his father said, the debts associated with the business were increasing rapidly. So now the investigation had a lot of useful information, and the detectives had a suspect, a neighbor, especially since in that area, violent crime was often linked to the cultivation of illegal herbs. Detectives felt that the threat of going to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. The problem was, no one had any idea which neighbor they were talking about. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing all the homeowners in a row. The tactic was successful. They found a man who confirmed the story of a quarrel with Adam over growing a forbidden crop. But according to him, after a sharp conversation, the conflict was over. The neighbor had an alibi, and another version turned out to be untenable. What remained to be dealt with was the financial crisis that had hit the family's business. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and interviewed the employees. Nolan's words were true. The company was in a sorry state. It was threatened with bankruptcy, as the amount of debts exceeded $30,000. Because of this, some employees were fired. It turned out that some of the former employees were extremely dissatisfied with the reduction and therefore could be involved in the crime. And that's where investigators got lucky. Over the weekend, the local high school organized a community cleanup day. The students were clearing debris from a business park just a mile from Adam's construction company. It was there on September 19th that a small purse with a wallet and identification cards belonging to Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan was found under one of the bushes. A .22 caliber rifle was lying nearby. Detectives immediately went to the scene of the discovery. The county sheriff's office made a new assumption. The perpetrator had massacred the Buchanan family with the found rifle and, covering his tracks, had taken their documents from the crime scene. The discovery was important because it meant that someone had traveled all the way to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the bag and murder weapon. It appeared to be a Bonita resident. The proximity of the evidence found to the location of Buchanan Construction strengthened the theory that the boss was massacred by one of the disgruntled employees. Detectives sent the firearm and the bag of documents for examination, requesting a warrant to inspect the company's records and premises. Here, the investigators got lucky a second time. During the search, they gained access to a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises. By happy coincidence, the lens of the camera was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. After this discovery, The case was just days away from being solved. Since it was already known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had told them. Detectives realized that the young man had deliberately manipulated the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators re-interviewed Nolan, trying to keep him safe while getting as many details as possible. Nolan again recounted his weekend, where he had been, and who he had seen. Only this time they asked him what movie they had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for the shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. The unsuspecting Nolan answered, with his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search Buchanan's home in Bonita, search the vehicles, and check financial records. The Ford automobile was still parked in the driveway. It was closely inspected, and they noticed reddish soil sticking to the wheels, similar to that in Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip last weekend or earlier, traces of soil might have remained, but they would not have been as obvious. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed the wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Detectives tracked the bank card payments and found that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at fast food chain Taco Bell on his way to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he stayed home, did not go with his parents, and had the credit card in his possession. Detectives went to the diner and checked the security cameras. They saw exactly what they expected: a white Ford instead of a truck. When detectives searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that included not 3 but 4 drinks. Evidence collected at the scene of the fire similarly pointed to 4 drink cups. So Nolan was in the car? The next credit card transaction took place on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club bar in Penryn, about 30 minutes away from the cabin. Adam's parents had previously told detectives about the bar. They said their son and daughter-in-law liked to drop in there after renovations to the cabin. Security cameras recorded the time the couple left the bar, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track the couple's route. A Ford F-150 headed toward the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and at 3:30 a.m. drove in the opposite direction. In the first instance, the camera captured Adam and Molly in the vehicle, and in the second, only Nolan. A few hours later, on Sunday morning, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to pay at 3 of Bonita's establishments: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to investigators that Buchanan had only one bank card. The facts contradicted Nolan's stories. By this time, forensic results had come back. Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested right in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. He attempted to distort the story and claimed that it was his father who shot the family, after which he pointed a rifle at him, and he, defending himself, took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan insisted it was self-defense, attributing the fire and subsequent lie to a state of panic and extreme fright. That's why he took gasoline and set the house on fire to make it look like nothing had happened there. The defense continually focused the jury's attention on Adam's abuse of his own son and other family members. The medical examiner questioned the verdict because the bullet wound mark on a piece of Gavin's skull was consistent with a shot fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed that his and his brother's beds were next to each other, and they were simultaneously awakened by the noise and screaming. It was at the moment of awakening that Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at him, and Nolan miraculously managed to push the attacker away. Under this scenario, the shot would have been fired at about a 45-degree angle, which was inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution came to believe that Nolan shot his brother when they were alone in the house while their parents spent time at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. Judging by where the bodies were found, Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. Then he went home, met his girlfriend and spent the day with her, creating an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury found Nolan guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Judge Kingsbury, in announcing the sentence, reflected on the verbal and physical abuse Nolan faced. On the testimony that Nolan massacred his brother because he didn't want him to go through the same horror or be forced to live with what his father had already managed to do to him. But as she did, she also listed facts about the premeditation of the crime and subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and the plans to run the family business that Nolan had voiced to family members. The judge cited a failure to follow rules and deviant behavior noted by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where Nolan went after his arrest. "Everyone has the opportunity to change," Judge Kingsbury told Nolan. "I hope you will do everything in your power to do so. If you behave well, you will have a chance to get out on parole in 25 years under the Senate bill and Supreme Court rulings. It's up to you whether you take that chance or not." Nolan continues to insist he is innocent. If he ever gets out on parole, he will have to pay a huge compensation to the victims. The amount of the payout is unknown at this time. The case of Mohammed Shamji, a brilliant surgeon, father of many, and ruthless criminal victims of domestic violence sometimes not only endure abuse, humiliation, and beatings, but also blame themselves for what's happening. Each of these cases, when brought to the public's attention, is condemned, causing confusion and leading to many questions. Why does the victim allow themselves to be treated this way? Why don't they tell anyone? Why don't they leave their abuser? Contrary to popular belief that physical violence occurs primarily in dysfunctional families, statistics show that such incidents don't depend on the social status of spouses, their position in society, or their job titles. Mohammed Shamji and Ilana Frick Shamji were not only outstanding doctors, but also true luminaries of science. Mohammed made a name for himself in neurosurgery and the treatment of spine injuries and diseases, while his wife was an equally renowned family doctor with a PhD. For years, they both saved other people's lives, yet few knew what was happening in their private lives. This story shocked the entire world, and the accused admitted his guilt only to spare his 12-year-old daughter, who had accidentally witnessed her mother's death, from having to testify in court. Notably, shortly before the tragedy, Ilana had posted a photo of her husband in a kimono on social media, taken during one of his jiu-jitsu training sessions, with a joking comment that this doctor could not only heal, but also break a neck. This post turned out to be prophetic. Ilana Frick. Life before meeting Mohammed. Ilana Christina Frick was born in September 1977 in the Canadian city of Windsor, located in Ontario in the southern part of the country. She was the younger of 2 daughters in the family of George and Anna Frick, who emigrated from Croatia to North America in the early 1970s. Elena was raised alongside her older sister Caroline, with whom she was very close from an early age. The birth of Ilana was seen as a miracle by her parents, as Anna had serious complications after her first pregnancy, and doctors had said she would never conceive again. Ilana's parents worked at a large car factory, striving to provide their daughters with everything they needed and to give them a good education. Both sisters were smart and did well in school, but Ilana stood out for her determination and passion for learning. She spent nearly all her free time reading books, and she also managed to attend a dance studio, practice gymnastics, and compete in track and field. During middle school, Ilana chose to work during summer breaks to help her family. She worked in cornfields, and even then tried to manage her budget wisely. Elena excelled in math and other sciences, and by high school, she had decided to pursue a career in medicine and become a doctor. She graduated from high school as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university without issue. Around this time, she also began a romantic relationship with a man named Matthew Ryan, whom she had known since high school and who was now studying in the same department. Their student romance lasted until graduation, but afterward, Frick decided to go to Ottawa and continue her studies in the capital's university residency program. Her boyfriend settled for a job at a local hospital and didn't consider furthering his studies. Elama's and Matthew's relationship continued long distance and lasted until nearly 2002. They even planned to marry, but eventually decided to remain friends. By then, Elena was interning at one of the country's top clinics and aimed to earn a doctorate, while Matthew hadn't advanced in his career. Love at first sight. In February 2003, during a night shift at the hospital, Elana went to the staff room and saw a new colleague who immediately caught her attention. The young man, Mohammed Shamji, was just a year older than Elana and was doing his residency in the neurosurgery department. Mohammed came from a family of prominent doctors. He was born and raised in Ottawa in a family of the renowned surgeon Farid Shamji and his talented psychiatrist wife, Edith. Mohammed's older brother, Ali, was an experienced medical biophysicist. Both brothers graduated from Yale University, and Mohammed later returned to Canada to earn his doctorate from Western Ontario's Research University. Mohammed was also interested in the blonde, but initially, he made no effort to approach her. Elana, however, fell for this tall, dark-skinned man at first sight and tried to attract his attention. Soon, Mohammed asked his colleagues for her number and sent her a message, and their relationship began to blossom. Elana considered Mohammed a shy and modest man. He rarely took the initiative, felt uncomfortable on dates, jumped from topic to topic, or fell silent, appearing detached and introverted. Later, it turned out, these oddities weren't due to shyness, but rather a lack of interest. Mohammed was already seeing another woman, but for some reason, he kept this from his infatuated colleague. When Frick discovered the existence of a rival, she resolved to win over Mohammed and become his one and only. Their relationship was rocky during the first year, with the couple breaking up 3 times before rekindling, mainly due to Elama's persistence. Her parents were aware of this and urged her to leave Mohammed, but she stood firm, believing she had found her one true love. Elana often pampered her lover with gifts, made surprises, and brought him home-cooked meals. Mohammed seemed to just let himself be loved, readily accepting everything but reciprocating only occasionally. This one-sided game appeared to create an emotional dependence on Mohammed for Elana. Unplanned pregnancy, wedding, and the beginning of a nightmare. In the summer of 2004, Frick informed her partner that they were going to have a child. This news came as a surprise to both of them, causing more anxiety than joy. Nonetheless, Mohammed, raised in a strict conservative Muslim country, felt compelled to follow tradition and marry the mother of his child before its birth. In early September that year, the couple had a wedding with 2 ceremonies. The first adhered to all cultural customs respected by the groom's family, and the second took place among the couple's friends at one of the trendiest restaurant complexes. The newlyweds seemed happy and in love, but no one could have imagined that their marriage would be the start of a nightmare that would end in tragedy. The couple moved into a spacious house in one of Ottawa's prestigious neighborhoods. In January 2005, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Yasmina. Unfortunately, the birth of their daughter didn't strengthen their marriage. The young father was entirely focused on his career and planned to continue his education, with his wife and newborn daughter taking a back seat. Moreover, Mohammed didn't hide his disappointment, as he had hoped for a son. After the birth of her child, Elana went on maternity leave, focusing on household chores and caring for her daughter. This irritated her husband, who, after returning from work, would retreat to his home office, spending little time with his wife and child. Over time, he became increasingly nervous and irritable, criticizing his wife's appearance, refusing to eat what she cooked, and calling her stupid and useless. Elana tried not to complain about her family issues, not even to close friends or parents. However, one day, while talking to her mother on the phone, Mohammed, returning home in a bad mood, began berating and insulting his wife, which her mother overheard. She tried to defend her daughter, but her son-in-law blamed Ilana for their crumbling marriage. Anna tried to convince her daughter to file for divorce and leave the man treating her this way, but Ilana flatly refused, saying she loved her husband and would handle everything. She kept quiet about Mohammed's physical abuse, simply because the verbal abuse no longer seemed enough for him. In the summer of 2005, the situation spiraled out of control when Mohammed, in a fit of rage, punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. Ilana, with her baby in hand, fled to friends and filed a police report for domestic violence. She also decided to get a divorce and leave the man she had married for good. Unexpectedly, Mohammed began begging his wife to return, promising never to hit her again or even raise his voice. He swore he would change and that their family life would be everything Ilana had ever dreamed of, and he would control his emotions. Shamji seemed sincerely remorseful, but this behavior was driven by certain circumstances. The young neurosurgeon was preparing to enroll at Duke University, aiming to earn his doctorate, and a criminal conviction could end his promising medical career. Mohammed cared only for himself and his future, but he succeeded in convincing Ilana to drop the charges and not file for divorce. She even agreed to follow him to the United States, to North Carolina, where he was to continue his studies and earn a degree. A period of relative calm. Friends and family were baffled by why Ilana didn't leave her tyrant husband and withdrew her police report. When she announced her intention to move to another country with Mohammed, they tried to dissuade her, but Ilana stood firm. Freak was smart, educated, driven, and ambitious, financially independent, and capable of achieving any career goal. But her destructive relationship and emotional dependence on her husband were stronger. She was ready to abandon everything and sacrifice all for a marriage that didn't bring her happiness, only suffering. However, after moving to the United States, a period of relative calm came to their family. Mohammed was admitted to an elite biomedical engineering program, difficult to enter due to the intense competition. Meanwhile, Ilana enrolled in a master's program at the School of Policy and Health at Duke University, receiving a scholarship covering her tuition. The couple seemed to reconnect, spending more time together. Their relationship became stable enough that they decided to have a second child. In August 2007, they welcomed their younger daughter, Faiza. However, Mohammed again couldn't hide his disappointment, as he had hoped for a son. What does the happy family keep secret? In late summer 2009, the couple and their children returned to Canada, settling back into their home in Ottawa. This time, Ilana decided not to stay on maternity leave for long, and she quickly secured a position at a prestigious hospital as a family doctor, earning a solid reputation. Meanwhile, her husband balanced work, studies, and teaching at the university. In the late 2000s, social media was gaining popularity worldwide, and the couple started a personal blog, showcasing a seemingly ideal family in every sense. They posted photos of their travels, spoke about achievements in science, flaunted their luxurious lifestyle in a lavish home, attended prestigious conferences and trendy resorts, and spent time with friends at expensive restaurants. From the outside, they appeared to be a happy, successful, wealthy, and deeply in love couple with no problems. But their followers couldn't fathom what was hidden behind this facade. In reality, Mohammed again distanced himself from his wife, continuing to exert strict control over her. He carefully monitored who she interacted with, what she wore, and even checked her email and social media accounts. He openly criticized her appearance, style, and parenting methods. But Ilana preferred to remain silent about it. The tension and aggression from Shamji grew, with him yelling at his wife and blaming her for all their arguments and discord. In 2011, the talented neurosurgeon was offered a fellowship in spinal surgery at one of the largest medical centers in Calgary. He accepted the offer, but this time he went alone, leaving his family in Ottawa since Ilana couldn't leave her job. For over a year, they maintained a long-distance relationship, but during one visit home, Mohammed left his laptop on, and Alana saw a message from a woman on his social media. The content suggested they were romantically involved. When Alana directly confronted Muhammad, he didn't deny it, admitting to having an affair. This was another painful blow for Frick, and she again considered divorcing her rude, unfaithful husband. Her family was sure she wouldn't forgive him this time. Surprisingly, Alana gave their family another last chance. Muhammad promised to end his affair and said they would start fresh in Toronto, where he had been offered a prestigious, well-paying job. Domestic violence and revenge affair. Shortly after moving, Muhammad expressed his continued desire for a son, suggesting they try again. Alana agreed, thinking that having a third child might help solidify their family. In October 2013, they welcomed a long-awaited boy named Marius. The father was happy, but his attitude toward his wife remained unchanged. Over the next few years, Shamji focused entirely on his medical career, becoming an accredited neurosurgeon with a reputation for handling the toughest and most hopeless cases that other doctors avoided. Frick also advanced, becoming a delegate for the Ontario Medical Association. However, tension between the couple began to rise again. Muhammad didn't stop at rudeness and insults, but resumed hitting the mother of his children. During a family ski vacation, Alana had a deep cut on her arm that required stitches, along with other injuries, but she claimed she hurt herself skiing. After returning home, Alana confided in her best friend that all the injuries were inflicted by her husband following another argument over a newly discovered affair he had with a colleague. Alana had overheard part of a phone conversation between Muhammad and his mistress, and when she asked him about it, he beat her. Her friend again suggested she divorce him, and when Alana refused, joked that she should get a revenge affair. The women laughed, but the hurt wife might have thought it was a good way to get back at her cheating husband. The summer of 2016 was challenging. While the older kids were at camp and the youngest stayed with maternal grandparents, the couple's relationship completely fell apart. In early September, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary, sharing the news on social media. But a week later, they spoke of divorce. Muhammad refused, stating he was content, while a desperate Alana had an affair with a colleague who had shown interest in her. She immersed herself in this new relationship, basking in the care and attention of another man, enjoying the long-forgotten feeling of being loved and desired. Did she run away with her lover, leaving her kids behind? On November 25, 2016, a heated argument broke out in the family when Elena told her husband that divorce was inevitable. The next day, she met with a divorce lawyer and then left for a 3-day medical conference in another city. During this time, Muhammad sent her messages, pleading with her to reconsider and save the marriage, at least for the children. On November 30th, Ilana returned home and made her final phone call to her parents. Her voice revealed some anxiety, but she assured them everything was fine. Later, it was discovered that she had tried calling the police that evening, but in her panic, misdialed one digit, leading to a tragic outcome. On December 1st, Anna couldn't reach her daughter, so she called her son-in-law to find out what had happened. Muhammad calmly told her that his wife had packed her bags in the middle of the night and fled to her lover, abandoning him and the children. Her parents didn't believe him, knowing their daughter would never leave her daughters and young son like that. They contacted a close friend of Alana's who lived nearby, asking her to discreetly watch the Shamji home while they took the first flight to Toronto and reported their daughter's disappearance to the police. Alana's friend reported that her car was still in the driveway, which only heightened the family's concern. Upon arriving at their daughter's house, they found nothing immediately suspicious. But Muhammad was agitated, saying they had called the police unnecessarily and insisting that Alana was with her lover. He had already told the police this version when they visited earlier, following the report of Mrs. Frickshamji's disappearance. Body in a suitcase. In the early morning hours of December 2nd, a man walking his dog along the river, about 24 miles from Shamji's home, saw a large suitcase at the base of the bridge. He was initially going to pass it by, but curiosity got the better of him, especially since the suitcase looked almost new. When he opened it, he was horrified to find the lifeless body of a blonde woman inside. He immediately notified the police, and the suitcase and body were sent to the medical examiner's office for identification and to determine the cause and circumstances of death. There were no issues with identification, as the criminal hadn't even bothered to remove the luggage tag from the suitcase from Alana's recent trip to a conference. Her parents confirmed her identity. The body had multiple abrasions and bruises, but the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. The woman was dressed in pajamas and had no shoes, and based on the position of her body, she had been placed in the suitcase immediately after her death. The young witness Muhammad was arrested that evening at a coffee shop where he was meeting with a lawyer. It was evident he was planning to leave the country, but he didn't have the chance. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the neurosurgeon denied any involvement. However, a horrific detail of the incident emerged. It turned out that the couple's eldest daughter, 12-year-old Yasmina, had accidentally witnessed her mother's assassination. According to the girl, she heard screams and noise coming from her parents' room and ran there. She cracked open the door and saw her father kneeling behind the bed. Her mother was likely lying on the floor, but Yasmina couldn't see her from the doorway. Muhammad yelled at his daughter, ordering her to leave immediately, shut the door behind her, and go to bed. In the morning, he told the girls that their mother had left. Yasmina, despite her age, understood something terrible had happened, but couldn't imagine that her father had taken their mother's life. A confession, trial, and sentence. To spare his daughter from having to testify in court, the accused confessed and recounted what happened that dreadful evening. According to him, he and his wife argued about her infidelity and desire for a divorce. Muhammad claimed he didn't mean to harm Alana, but things escalated spontaneously. The argument turned physical, and she tried to call the police, but he knocked the phone from her hand. She began screaming, and Muhammad struck her multiple times in the face, then pinned her to the floor and strangled her with his hands. At this moment, their daughter walked in but couldn't see what was happening due to the bed. When Muhammad realized his wife wasn't breathing, he attempted to resuscitate her, but it was in vain, as in his rage, he had broken her neck. He then put her body in a large suitcase, loaded it into the trunk of his car, and drove around aimlessly for hours, unsure of what to do next. Upon reaching a small bridge over a river, he decided to throw the suitcase down, hoping the current would carry it away, making it impossible to find. However, in the darkness, he didn't see that the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation. In fall 2017, while the trial of the criminal surgeon was underway, a new scandal erupted involving his father, Farid Shamji, who made disparaging remarks about his deceased daughter-in-law. He attempted to justify his son's actions, saying his wife had been unfaithful and provoked him. These comments led to an investigation into the elderly man, and his medical license was revoked. In April 2019, Muhammad was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, though with the possibility of parole in 14 years. Given the time served during the trial, he may be released as early as 2030. Moreover, Muhammad was forbidden from contacting his children or Alama's parents and ordered to pay them a large sum as compensation. He was also permanently stripped of his medical license, barring